Joyful souls, this is Quinn Curtis, and you are listening to Joyful Living. And not only are you listening to Joyful Living, but you're listening to the 100th episode of Joyful Living. This is a really big, exciting deal, and I'm so grateful for you being here on this journey with me. I was just checking back in my archives to see when was episode 1 actually released. It was released July 27th of 2015. So from the time of this recording, that is about 3.5, almost closer to 4 years, but 3.5 to 4 years ago, this project began, and it has been truly a joy project. I've learned so much over the years of really diving in and interviewing lots of people about what does joy actually look like in your life, and what does joyful living look like for you? And it's been quite a journey. And so today I wanted to share my top 10 takeaways from this journey of nearly 4 years and 100 episodes of diving into what is joy, why does it matter, how do we get more of it, just all that good stuff. So I'm so grateful that you're joining me here today. So let's go ahead and dive in. First of all, I wanted to start with just a little nugget that just hit me last week that I feel like really encompasses all this journey of joyful living. And it was, I was just laying in bed with my husband, and we were just over the weekend, and we were just kind of watching a random show. And I don't know that it was a very exciting moment, but it certainly was kind of a normal, average moment. And I just had this thought of like, is this really as good as it gets? And there's always this tendency of mine to want to just make life better and move on to the next better thing and create something more amazing, which I think is healthy when kept in check, but also can be very distracting. And so as I sat there and I realized, kind of just looked around and what is in my life? And I realized, oh my gosh, like even if I accomplish all of the amazing things that I am excited to and committed to, at the end of the day, to be able to be with my best friend and to be able to be in his arms and just feel loved, right? Or to have people in my life that love me and care about me and that I can just be me around, right? I think that is as good as it does get. And so I was realizing I've been missing a lot of, moments and joy because I keep worrying or wondering, is this as good as it gets? Nope, let's make it better. Instead of actually stopping to savor what is already here. And so this rolls right into one of the most important lessons that I've learned of the top 10. We'll just start it off on a high point, that joy requires presence. There is no joy without presence, without us being here now. And that's the craziest, most magical thing about joy, is that it actually is what surrounds us. It's there all the time, in the air around us, every single day, waiting to be felt, waiting to be savored. It's like it's the air that we breathe. It's the gravity holding us to the earth. It's joy. And so when we are not present and we are continually distracted and, trying to find something better all the time, we really do miss those moments. And I really feel like, at the end of our life, that we'll look back and think, how many moments did I savor? I know there's a popular song right now that's something like, these are the best days of our life, right? Like that we keep thinking that tomorrow is going to be the best day of our life, but it's always now. Now is the best day of our life. And so being present, being fully here now is the most powerful way to experience joy. And so you'll find that your anxieties and your stressors and all of those pieces, they rarely are actually here with us in the present moment. They're usually just in our heads, or maybe it's a nagging feeling in our body. But as soon as we take some deep breaths and we just get right here, right now, we find there's always peace, there's always joy, there's always aliveness. And that's what makes things okay. That's what starts to move things along. So that is the first major lesson, is that there is no joy without presence. The second major lesson is that joy means aliveness. We just touched on this just briefly, but this is a big question that's come up in a lot of episodes and a lot of discussions that I've had, that even I've had people come on the show who have felt intimidated to talk about joy because they feel like they just aren't generally, super happy, or they keep waiting for that joy and that uber happiness that's coming after they've created the next few things, or they've done the next few things, or they have the perfect whatever. But to really actually stop and realize that when we really surrender to aliveness, like that, it's just the joy is the feeling of being alive. That's it. And that feeling, like tapping into it, is what makes us more joyful. It's nuts. And so joy doesn't mean that we're happy all the time. It doesn't even necessarily mean happiness, although I do think that joy is at the root of happiness, that sometimes happiness is this thing where it's like a fleeting moment, or a fleeting happy kind of a thing, or makes us feel good, right? But that when we're really anchored into joy, it gives this fullness and this depth to happiness that makes it a very different thing than just chasing, things or stuff, or the next big thing, or more income, or whatever it might be, or more perfect relationships, whatever it might be. And so joy means aliveness. And so in that same vein, then that takes us to the third point, which is that joy requires us to feel our lives. Joy requires us to feel our lives. So we're never going to find joy in our heads. And our heads actually think that they are amazing at helping us create joy. They think that they can solve the problem, this massive, perplexing Rubik's Cube of a problem of how to actually live a joyful life. But our brains will never solve it. They can help. They're a powerful tool that we can use to support us, getting our lives in order, or, working some things out. But ultimately, we never find joy in the brain. Joy is in the body, which is our next point, that joy is in the body. So that means that when we are fully present and we're actually feeling in our body, we're feeling our lives, then that is when we're going to feel joy. And so a lot of us have kind of turned off our filter for joy because we're so afraid of feeling pain. And so we have, just tried to turn off feeling and just create a little bit of some numbness so that we're not constantly barraged with pain and struggle and just those ouchy feelings. But when we actually get down in the bodies and we feel our lives, we find that our emotions are so much more like the weather, in that pain or, sadness or depression, that those are just passing storms, but there's always this joy and peace underneath all of it. Okay, so joy requires us to feel our lives, and joy is in the body. I should have counted these prior. Let me just check where we're at right now. So I'll just recap. This will be healthy for all of us. So first one is that joy, goodness. Yeah, joy means aliveness. That was the first one. There we go. Joy, there is no joy without presence. We're rolling now. Joy requires us to feel our lives. And the fourth, joy is in the body. Okay, so those are our top 4 things so far of the top 10 that I'm sharing. So let's move on to the number 5. So the number 5 is that gratitude is the doorway into joy. You really can't have joy without gratitude. And so this is one that has sprung a gratitude practice for me, where whenever that anxiety or depression starts to creep up, those are good moments to really reflect and actually It's like we are gathering these joyful moments all day, and we can taste them and feel them and savor them in the moment. But then actually, right before bed is my favorite time to do this, or when I'm on a car drive and I'm getting home after a long day or whatever it might be, to actually kind of sit with that little box of joyful moments that you've gathered just from that day. Like, I try not to expand it out towards the year or my entire life or anything like that, because I feel like that takes me out of presence, and that moves me into a space of feeling like yesterday was better than today, or last year, or when my kids were little, or whatever it might be. And that takes me out of presence. So when I just keep it to joy today, and I kind of unwrap each of those gifts again, and I just let myself feel how good it felt to sit by my daughter, how good it felt to brush her hair, how good it felt to see the sun sparkling through the leaves as I was driving, or to see new flowers blooming, right? Or to have someone reach out and text me that I was so excited by, right? And to actually unwrap those again. And that's gratitude to me. It's not just listing off, I have so many blessings. These are my blessings. It's actually savoring and feeling the goodness in your life, the goodness in your day, each day, because inevitably, even on my worst days, my hardest days, when I have been insanely distracted and in so much pain and just really not in a good place, then when I do this exercise, I actually close my eyes and I feel into what were the most joyful, beautiful moments of my day. There are always some to savor. And then that brings me into more joy. So gratitude is the doorway into joy. Number 5. Number 6 is that joy is the most magnetic force on the planet. So as we stay in and we savor and we cultivate more joy in our lives, it draws even more good things to us. And it draws the right things to us and the right people. It draws high vibrational people who are ready to have fun and play with us, and who see and value us. It draws more goodness to us. And so if you're creating something like a business, or you are, or a family, right? And you're, trying to show up in that, and you're just struggling, and you're thinking, when is life ever going to get better? Leaning into joy will unlock things getting better. That will start drawing everything that you're desiring to you, including the right projects and the right people and the right supports, and makes everything so much better. That was number 6. Number 7 is that joy requires us to show up for ourselves and our lives. It requires accountability and taking responsibility for our lives, our choices, and the consequences. And so in this way, joy requires us to stay awake. It requires us to stay awake in our lives, and not slip into that victim kind of mentality, or that space where we want to blame everybody else, or blame life, or blame God for why our lives are so hard. It's which leads us into the next point, is that joy is not an arrival point. It is a journey. Joy is a habit, a daily choice. Right, and this one is tricky. But the good news about a habit is that the more that we do it and the more that we focus on it, the more it actually will happen. Right, we cultivate joy. To me, means cultivating a habit of joy, a habit of turning to joy when things get hard, or turning to joy when things get really good, and then you start feeling a little bit nervous, like the good's going to go away. Joy is a habit, and it's not an arrival point. I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings in our world, is that if we just get to this certain point, or we just have this next thing, or we just create this next big leap, that then finally we'll be happy. Finally we'll have the joy we want. And it's just never that way. Joy is a daily piece, and it's it's like time, and that once that day is gone, it's gone, right? And so in my mind, joy has actually become very synonymous with time, because I think that joy is in every tick of that clock. It's in every breath that we take. And just like we can get distracted and lose track of time and miss hours of the day, or hop on Facebook and then wonder, oh my gosh, how did it become 3 hours later or something? The same thing happens. We're just always missing joy. And that's not something I say to stress us out. I don't believe that our quest is to feel it all the time, but I do believe that we're looking in the wrong places largely as a society, and we're hunting for it outside of ourselves and outside of the present moment, outside of our body. And we're never going to find it. And that hunt and looking in those wrong places just leaves us more empty and missing it, right? So in that space, leading us to our next point, which is number 9, which is that joy is vulnerable. So this is one of the pieces, where we're just saying in point number 8 that joy, or 7, joy requires us to show up for ourselves and our lives, right? Joy is very vulnerable. And I wasn't really expecting that going in. I kind of thought you would hit this point where joy would just be joy and you'd just be happy in your life all the time. But I've really come to find over the years that, the rest of the world doesn't necessarily cheer us on in living a joyful life. And all too often we're like the crabs in a bucket and we just pull each other down, right? And so I think that some of this is us being able to find our own balance point with joy, where we can maintain and support our own experience of joy without compromising anybody else's necessarily, or like it's not at the expense of others' joy, but that we just are living in a space of joy and comfortable in joy, like actually feeling comfortable in the skin of joy, in the skin of our body, right? This is a big deal. Establishing a new comfort zone, that we can be in a room of people who are determined to be pessimistic and are determined to struggle and are so committed to the belief that life is so hard and that after we die, that it's going to get better maybe or something. And to be able to stay in that space and stay in joy, to actually abide in it. And I believe that joy really is what all the great teachers of and faith promoters of time have said, that it's the presence of God, right? Joy is the presence of God. It's the space where we find meaning. It's the space of life and aliveness. So if we can abide that presence of God, that joy that's weaving in that presence in all of our daily lives, and not get distracted from that space, but actually abide in it, then our joy becomes more and more full. It becomes a return to the truth of who we are, because at the core of who all we are is joy. I believe that joy is in the very fiber of our being. Like if you were to strip back everything, think at the atom of life itself is joy. It's a spark of joy that then brought all of this amazing life and this planet and our children and puppies and everything. Like it just brings everything and all the hard parts of life that try our hearts so much, and that open them to more joy, that break them open to more joy, and get us out of our misery comfort zone into a space where we can tend and nurture a garden, an Eden of joy within our own heart and with our own lives. Doesn't that just feel amazing? It feels amazing to me. So that leads us to our last and final point of what I've learned over the years, which makes me really emotional because I really feel this one. But and that is that joy will save us. Joy will save us. So instead of being so excited about, or not even excited, that's a bad way to say it, but um, if more of us in this world are able to find and endure and savor joy and abide in joy, right? This world gets better. We start taking care of ourselves. We take care of each other. We take care of our planet, right? But this constant clamoring for happiness, and for not even that, but just like, it's like we're starving for joy. And we're just trying to get this nourishment and this hole filled, this hunger with junk food. All these things that are never going to bring us joy. They're never going to fill that hole. But we're in a habit of seeking them, and in a habit of trying to make that be what's missing in our life and be what will fill the hole. And it's just making us more sick. And so actually connecting into joy now, realizing joy now, and realizing that our joy matters is what will bring the healing and the peace that we want in this world. Like, everybody just wants to be happy, right? At the end of the day, that's all we want. We want to feel good, right? But when we are in, these places in our brains and in our pop culture which tell us that to be happy we have to have all of these things, or we listen to all the marketing. I mean, gosh, you can barely do anything. I can't even drive on the freeway. There's beautiful mountains surrounding me. I can't even drive and not see the massive billboards marketing to me about how I have a problem and how their product and solution is going to fix it. And that's not saying that problems can't be solved and supported with the solutions that are out in the world. But I think that this heaviness in marketing, or this saturation in marketing being everywhere, I mean, even down to our children and the shows that they're watching, they're being marketed to. And then we're buying them the toys that go with the shows, that go with the whatever. Like, it just is all, it's all marketing. It's trying to fill that hole instead of, anyways, I just think that saturation has disenchanted us from actually ever being able to realize joy. It's made us feel like joy is actually very far away, because there's a whole lot more things that we don't have, right? And it's that havingness that makes us think that we will have joy. We'll feel whole, right? But what we're not realizing is that we don't feel whole, and we feel empty, because we are broken in pieces. Our own soul, our own being, we are broken in pieces from ourselves, right? And so the havingness that we're craving is not a havingness of things, it's a havingness of our soul. It's a havingness of ourself, our own aliveness, our own connection to life, our own connection to the heartbeat of this planet, Mother Earth, right? We're craving that and feeling so disconnected from it. And then in all this craving for havingness, then we're missing the point, right? And instead, when we're anchored to joy, then we see this is a playground. This is a space of creativity where we can create whatever we're wanting. We can show up to serve. We can create heaven, patches of heaven on earth in whatever space that we are able. And that this distraction from joy, and what really is joy, is keeping us from being liberated. It's keeping us in pain, and it's keeping us stuck and in bondage, looking for somebody to let us out and to open up the cage. And we're the ones who have the key. The joy was always there. It's like Dorothy and Oz, right? We were always wearing the red shoes. So, this path of studying joy and feeling into it has just made me more committed than ever to be in support of joy. And I believe in a world where there is more joy. I believe that this is a major part of my mission. This is a major gift that I want to give to my children and grandchildren and my neighbors' children and grandchildren, and people all over the world's children and grandchildren, is a world where there's more joy, because it's going to be a safer world if there's more joy. Right? And the path to joy is not necessarily easy. Like I said, it's a choice, it's a habit. It's a lot easier to just go with the flow and feel like a victim and blame and look at all the hard things that have happened in our lives and think that, that's as good as it's going to get and our life is already ruined. Or, that was a major part of my journey for sure. Is I just thought, well, genetically, I was diagnosed with a mental illness. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in my early 20s. And what was actually happening was definitely a few things, but that major depression and anxiety wasn't just because of a chemical imbalance. It was also because I was living a depressing life. I was living a life for somebody else's happiness. I wasn't showing up for myself and for my dreams. And I was just letting life happen. And I was missing the point. I was thinking that joy would be in these other things, and I was working aggressively to get those things, right? And then I had 5 kids. Kids was supposed to make me happy. So let's times that by 5. And instead it created a world of intensity and pain and struggle. And so then I had to dig myself out of that and find out, oh my gosh, where's the joy in being a mother? Truly, I mean, I know that sounds crazy because I'm actually all about that now, but it was not easy. There were so many times of driving down the freeway with my babies in the car and just wishing I could just drive us off the freeway and take us out of this painful life. And just luckily not taking that step. Right? But the fight for joy is real. We're all showing up to that fight every single day. And when we, what actually stops us from living joy, I've decided it's 3 main things. So the first thing is, I would actually say, let's add 4 things. I'm just seeing, there we go. I'm seeing a little hole. So we're going to catch that right now. So the first thing is our stories and our beliefs. Our stories and beliefs, I feel like, are pretty similar to each other, so they can be used interchangeably. But our stories about our lives, ourselves, other people, what's possible, that absolutely stops us. So, for example, I leave in a week to head to Australia, and I'm really excited more for when I get to Australia, but I've had some anxiety come up about getting ready and having a whole week to get a ton done in order to be able to be ready to go and be gone for a week and then be on a plane for almost 24 hours. It's not quite that long, but it feels like that. So I've been just looking at this week like, oh, can't wait till this is over. Well, that's my story about this week, right? So then as soon as I went back into, now, wait a minute, I chose joy. Joy is what my life is all about. So what am I believing about today or about this week that's limiting my joy? What's the story I'm telling myself? The story I'm telling myself is there's no time, that it's going to require me hustling and killing myself to make it happen. And in reality, that's not the truth at all. And as soon as I shifted that belief and realized, wait a minute, what if this could be the best day ever? What if this could be the best week ever? Because it's full of joy, because I'm savoring the joy and I'm showing up for joy, right? Then that's where the magic happens, right? So our stories and our beliefs. The second big thing that stops us from joyful living is distraction and busyness, which really just equals a lack of presence. So lack of being here and now. So we're either in our brains, which is always we're in yesterday or tomorrow, but we're not here now, right? That third thing that limits our joy is misunderstanding, just plain and simple, which I guess we could wrap in number 4 too, but we'll keep them separate. Misunderstanding, meaning misunderstanding the value of joy, the vitality of joy, why we need it, why it matters, why it's not just something that's the scraps of life, but it's actually life itself. And that when we miss it, we feel like we're missing life, right? And when we misunderstand, then we don't know how to value it or prioritize it, which leads us into the 4th piece, which is the not having or knowing or using the tools and strategies, the real tools and strategies that support joy. So just like that strategy I was sharing earlier in this episode about gratitude and savoring, unpacking the joy from the day, like that is a powerful strategy that helps us to live more joy. But so many of us aren't really armed with a lot of tools and strategies. And all we have instead are ideals. We have bumper stickers. We have, reach for the stars kind of mantras. We have affirmations, but we don't actually have the tools and strategies required to actually change our life or make it better or clean up our life so that there's more room to feel the joy, right? Any of those pieces. And so that's been a big mission of this podcast, is to actually arm you and discuss real tools and strategies that support us with living more joy. So my intention as we look forward towards the next 100 episodes is to keep staying connected to that vision of arming you with more tools and strategies, to stay in this conversation, to keep it front of mind for you so that you and I and our neighbors and our coworkers and the people that we connect with, that we can stay anchored to joy, that we can ever more abide in more joy. And that in that piece that we are really listening to what's going on in our hearts and our souls. When our bodies start to get sick, we listen, right? Because we don't want to get sick. We don't want to stay sick. And so we work to support it. But when our hearts get sick and we get a little bit of a soul fever, as Kim John Payne would say, then, do we show up for our soul? And I would argue, no, I don't think largely that we do. And so it's just that space, like when I was struggling so much with mental illness, it was this space of people saying, okay, you can take the day off of work because you have the flu, but you can't take the day off of work because you're so depressed you can't get out of bed. Like, get out of bed. It's depression. Deal with it, right? And I know that I walk that line. I've been accused of that before, not for a long time, but accused of kind of bringing that depression, anxiety world into this conversation. The only reason I do it is to just help you see that these skills and tools work in even the most desperate of circumstances and times. And having the right tools and strategies works in every situation. Even if you have received a really difficult diagnosis like I did. I mean, my diagnosis was so severe, they told me I would never be able to have children, right? Just to give you an idea. So even in that space, finding and like choosing to use those tools and strategies like nutrition, right? Like if joy is in the body, then we're actually giving our body nourishing food and drink so that it can process and digest everything. Like the same thing is happening with our emotional digestive system, where we have life happening all the time. And if we're clogging down our bodies with heaviness and with junk and with, allergens or whatever it might be, right? Then it's making it harder for our body to process and digest life. And so we're getting continual indigestion emotionally, right? And continual pain and cramping and just sickness, right? When we don't have that digestion piece clear, where we're able to move through life, digest and walk through it, then it just backs up, and that backup is a major part of what creates illness and disease and major pain. And when we don't know what to do with that major pain, then all too often we spread that pain to others. And I'm just as guilty as the rest of us. I I tell my kids this all the time, that there are no bad people per se. There are just people in pain. And that when we don't know how to work through and digest and move through our pain and get out of it, right, or find healing in it, then it's very difficult for us to not spread it, right? And so our responsibility is to manage our emotional health, to manage our pain, to find ways of releasing and setting ourselves free from it, right? And this is the path of joy. So we have a responsibility to this planet, to ourselves, to our families, to the generations after us, to choose joy. Because choosing joy will lead to healing. It will lead to freedom. It will lead to peace. And so with that space, I'm just wanting to show up on this episode 100 and recommit to you that my mission in this world is to set dreams free. It's to stop the casualties of dying, broken, abandoned dreams. Because dreams are directly connected to joy. And in this space, when we honor our dreams and we realize that they're sacred and that our joy actually matters, that it means something, that it's not just a great, nice thing to have, but it's actually our vitality, it's our life force, right? And it makes us come alive. And so I'm recommitting my mission to helping more people come alive, to help get rid of the blocks that are standing in their way and keeping them from bringing their big, beautiful, needed selves and dreams and projects and solutions into the world. It's to eradicate this global depression that we've just called this is life. And this is just, just medicate yourself out of it or distract yourself out of it and just get out of this insanity obsession with tomorrow and perfection and not good enough, and even this perfection that leads to death, right? This death of our dreams, this death of our vitality, this death of what really matters, this death of time with our loved ones, time to feel alive, time in our bodies, right? Time, it's robbing us of it. And to nurture and protect life, right? To call out the dreamers from hiding and to awaken the sleeping giants. To stop us destroying ourselves and to help us fully step into being life-giving creators that we already are. That's the truth of who we are. Life-giving. Right? And so to be life-giving, we have to come alive. And joy is the gateway. Joy is the door. Joy is life itself. And so my hope and my prayer as you are listening to this episode 100, glorious moment with him, being a part of this with me, that you'll recommit yourself to joy. You'll align your heart and your life and your body and your health, align it to joy, and you'll show up for it because it matters. It doesn't just matter for you. It matters for this planet. It matters for the people you love, and it matters for the people coming. For our duty to make this world a better place. So honor your joy, and I invite you to continue on this path, this joyful journey with me as we move out of episode 100 and into the hundreds of the Joyful Living podcast. Please share this podcast. Please use it and listen and stay with me on this path. Let's find joy. Let's savor it. And let's create a more joyful world together today, starting now, starting with your joy right now today. Oh, love you all so dearly, and I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for being on this joint journey with me. Thank you for showing your support through listening and through your comments and through your feedback and through just knitting your heart together with mine in and saying this matters, this conversation matters, joy matters. So always remember as you move forward from here, your joy matters and your dreams are sacred. So much love to you, and talk to you soon. Bye. And in the end, love will last.
You've been listening to Joyful Living. If you haven't already done so, be sure to email me at quinn@joyfullivingmovement.com so I can send you our yummy Joyful Living welcome package filled with lots of awesomeness, including access to our private Joyful Living network. I read every email from my listeners and would love to hear from you. Also, be sure to leave a review on iTunes, and most importantly, have a joy-filled day.